Well, hey there, guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, we're taking another look at one of Stirlingkit's steam engine kits. Well, it wasn't that long ago on the show that I brought you guys this, which was a steam engine kit from Stirlingkits. They were good enough to send it out to me, and we played around with it on the show. We assembled it, we fired it up, and got the steam engine running pretty well. It's just fascinating, these steam engines and the way they work. Well, they've done it again, and they've sent me out another steam engine kit that we're going to play around with today on the show. This one has a bit of a twist. It's not just a steam engine that runs, but in fact, it connects to a generator, which in turn powers a miniature street light. So what we're going to do is we're going to head over to the bench. We're going to put this thing together. I'm going to fire it up and see if we can't get the steam engine running, but more importantly, see if we can't get that generator to power up the street lamp. So this is the box that came from Stirlingkits. I got it a couple days ago, and inside we have this nice little Christmas box here, Merry Christmas with Stirlingkit here. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at what we've got inside of here. Now, I don't want to do an unboxing video because those are notoriously boring. So I'm going to get all of the parts out of this kit. I'm going to make sure that everything is there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to assemble this and see how we make out. Well, the first thing I'd like to kind of point out here is the fact that these instructions are very well done. Very large sheets of paper, just as they were on the first steam engine. Very easy to decipher, very easy to read. But these parts are dead solid. I love the fact that they're all metal for starters. There's very little plastic involved in any of this, and they are very solidly made, very clean. There are no deformities. Everything looks absolutely fantastic. One of the main differences I can see here right off the bat is this one has a much better or much upgraded steam whistle, it would appear, which is kind of a neat feature. I like that. The valve is pretty much the same as the first boiler, it looks like, as is the fill tube. Everything looks absolutely great. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with step one. And in step one, we want to take the cylinder and crank and we want to mount it to the installation board. So using the hardware that they suggest, we're just going to bolt those two pieces together. Well, the next step in this process is to attach that cylinder and crank assembly that we just put together onto our base. Now we're going to space it out with some of the brass spacers that are provided, but following the instructions, we're going to mount that assembly, and as well, we're going to mount the bearing seats that are included, just following the diagram to make sure that we put them in the right place and put the bigger one on the right side. Well, we're now going to place our bearings here in our bearing seats. Now, guys, while it may be tempting to crank this down, there is play in these here, and they will have shafts that have to go in through. So you may need to do some adjustments. So just finger tight on those pieces. Anyway, we're going to take one bearing and put it into our small bearing seat. And then in our larger or taller bearing seat, one of these bearings actually comes from each side to meet in the middle, just like that. Well, we're now going to take this assembly, which is the valve shaft and crank, and we're going to place it into our cylinder and crank. And it will just go right inside this little hole right here. Just like that. Now you want to make sure that you have it in the right way, and that will be with this little brass ring here, the one that has the set screw in it to go onto your main flywheel shaft. That has to be facing in towards where the flywheel will go. So with that done now, we can take this adjustable arm here. We have this piece, which is our adjusting handle. We can place that onto our large bearing seat, and that will extend out through the side. We will screw it in place with this little thumb screw. And then that arm that comes from the valve shaft and crank, that will go right here onto this handle, sit in the squared hole, and then it will bolt in place with the supplied hardware. Well, it's now time to put the flywheel in place. So we need the shaft, and the shaft will go through the bearing as well as through the lock collars that are on the flywheel, as well as the lock collar that is on the valve shaft and crank. And then it will come right through the other two sets of bearings and into this lock collar over here, which is on the cylinder and crank assembly. So I'm going to get this put into place, and then on the flat surface of this shaft, you want to make sure that all of these lock collars tighten down onto that flat section of the shaft to make sure that everything is secured in place. And we can now put our belt pulley onto our flywheel shaft, again making sure that we lock it in place with the set screw on the flat section of the flywheel shaft. Well, we now want to install our generator and our streetlighter base. So I've spun this completely around. The wires will go down through this square hole right here for the generator, and we're going to mount it in place using the provided hardware, and as well, we're going to bolt down our streetlighter base. Well, at this point, we can install the O-ring belt, and it will go on the smaller section of the pulley on the generator, the larger wheel on our flywheel, just like that. And we can also install the remaining components of our streetlighter and as well our switch, which will go installed into this hole right here. Well, we now have to make the connections for the power, and it has this little power connection block that gets bolted to the underside of our main base plate. But the best part here is you don't have to know anything about electrical connections because everything is color coded. So the red wire will go into the red section as well. The red wire from the generator will go into the red section, the yellow from the generator into the yellow from the switch into the yellow, and the blue wires go into the blue. And all you need to do is once you get this bolted in place, you will lift up the little handle here, the little set bar, and you'll place your wire inside and then close it back up, and that is your connection made. So I'm going to get those done, and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so following the instructions now with the wiring done, we need to bolt the furnace base plate into its position here at this back end. So we have two side plates, two front plates. It's a little finicky. You may want to get someone to help you to bolt this in place. It always helps to have a second set of hands. So I'm going to get the entire furnace box installed, and then I think we can move on after that to installing the boiler. Well, we can now put the boiler in place, and right here, just by the generator, we can see there's this little hole. You'll want to make sure that this steam tube comes out that hole. Okay, we'll sit the boiler in place onto the furnace, and then we will secure it down with these round stainless brackets and some of the supplied hardware. Well, the last thing that we need to do is run our steam line from our boiler. So we'll just push this onto that little hose that we stuck out through the hole of our furnace. Just going to seat this fully on here, and that will come over to this side right here onto our cylinder and crank assembly, and it will connect right here to this side of our crank assembly. Just like that. So the only thing we really have to do here now is I'm going to put the burner together. I'm going to fill up our boiler with some distilled water, and we're going to fill up our burner for our furnace with some alcohol. And let's fire this thing up and see if we can't get at least the steam engine running, and hopefully then get our street light to ignite or to illuminate as well. So let me get that done, and then we're going to fire this thing up. Well, in order for you to run this engine, you kind of need to know what you're looking at. You kind of need to know the parts. So up here we have your main steam valve. This is your whistle. This here, back at this back end, this is where you're going to fill your tank. You only want to fill it between half and 3/4. Don't fill it right up. This here is your exhaust port. These two little dials here, these are your condensation release valves. So the very first thing you want to do, now that we have this filled with distilled water, is this is the furnace area. And this is where your burner is going to go. So we need to ignite the burner and place it into our furnace area. Now you want to be careful not to overfill it so that you don't spill alcohol everywhere. All right, so we have that in here, and now we need to wait for those flames to boil our water within our boiler here to generate the steam. So it looks like we're getting some steam there now. We're just going to open up the main valve, and that's going to allow the steam to travel down to our main area here. Once we get the valve open, we're going to open up our release valves over here on the other side, and we're going to spin our flywheel to allow those to drain. And then we can close off those valves and spin our flywheel till we get the engine to run. All right, and there we go. And with that going like crazy now, let's see if we can get our light to ignite. Ha, look at that. Guys, that is spectacular. And of course, you can use this control here to slow it down or speed it up. Wow. That's awesome. And we've got this exhaust port here. I don't know if you can see the steam that's coming out of this exhaust port right here. But now that this thing is fired up, that is just running non-stop to power up our generated light. And of course, if we want, we can speed it up. Just turn this around so you can see it. That's pretty spectacular. I love it. And there you have it. The steam engine and generator kit by Stirlingkit. Guys, once again, this is a very cool unit. I don't know what it is about steam engines that are just so fascinating, but the way that they work is just phenomenal. Now, at the beginning with this, I was spinning that flywheel, trying to drain out the valves and trying to get the motor started after closing those valves again. And it just wouldn't fire up because I was spinning it the wrong way. That adjustment lever that we installed earlier is for speed, but not only for speed, but it reverses direction. So the direction that I had it set in, I was spinning that flywheel in the wrong direction. And as soon as I spun it in the right direction, well, you saw in the video, that thing just took off, and holy crow, is it fast. The RPM on this thing is phenomenal, much higher than what I was able to get the original Stirlingkit steam engine. So I may look into that again and fire it up and play with it some more. Maybe I need to make a couple of adjustments on the other one or get a higher steam content. Maybe I need to open the valve more. Who knows? There's quite a few adjustments throughout the process of getting the steam engine running to be able to boost the RPM. But this one here, wow, what a load of RPM. And the fact that it fires up that generator through the belt and that generator spins like mad, and then you flick the switch and on comes the little street light. It's kind of a cool little unit. I really like it. Now this one here is a little different from the original in that the original had a drain pan underneath it that would catch any of the steam from the release valve. Whereas this one here, it seems that the exhaust pumps out, and that exhaust is warm steam. Do not put your fingers in front of that exhaust. But as it cools, it condensates. So there was quite a bit of liquid that eventually pooled just underneath the exhaust port. It's okay, a little wipe and it was gone. It didn't really make that big of a mess and I wasn't that concerned, but just something to keep in mind. Also, if you're going to be using this around the young ones, please, guys, that boiler gets scorching hot. The boiler, the steam whistle, anything that is brass that is connected to the steam system or connected to or has direct contact with the furnace gets boiling hot. So please, if you're going to open that valve, use the tweezers that are provided. Do not use fingers to touch this thing. It will remove your fingerprints with a bad burn. So be very careful. It is a very good conductor of heat and it will conduct it right into your hands. So please be aware of that, especially when using it with the young ones. But all in all, guys, just a fun kit. It took a couple hours to put together and then playing around with it. I can't say enough about these kits. They're fun. They're interesting. They're any young one who is not enthused by a steam engine. I mean, they are just, they're technology that is timeless. It is fantastic. And this kit is no different. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank Stirlingkit for sending me out the steam engine and generator kit to play with on this week's show. I am going to post all the links in the video description to be able to order a kit like this if you'd like. I'll also post a discount code down there that you can add to your order to get a little bit off the price of the kit. If you haven't already, or if you found any part of this show interesting or fun, why not like and subscribe to the channel? We have an amazing audience base, and I'm hoping that you're going to consider becoming a part of it. Guys, I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you're going to look into these kits for yourself and follow the links down below. I hope that you're going to get some of them for your kids to play around with, or even for yourself if that's what you're into. But more importantly, I hope you're going to join me again next week when I bring you yet another Alternative Tuesdays.